If you've been scrolling through endless listings, comparing dimensions, price tags, and trying to picture how a beverage center would actually fit into your kitchen or office, you know the frustration of not being sure which model actually makes sense. I've spent a good chunk of the past week looking at a handful of 24-inch refrigeration units, reading the spec sheets, and even watching a couple of unboxing videos to see how they behave once they're out of the box. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What I'm about to walk through is why the Summit 24-inch beverage center feels like a surprisingly balanced choice for a specific set of buyers, and why it might be a miss for others. First off, let's talk about the everyday scenario that usually triggers the need for a dedicated beverage cooler. Imagine you're hosting a weekend brunch for a group of friends, or you run a small conference room where you want a constant supply of cold drinks without sending someone to the main kitchen every 10 minutes. In those moments, the convenience of having a compact fridge that sits on the counter, holds enough bottles for a small party, and looks sleek enough to blend with modern decor is worth its weight in convenience. The Summit unit gives you 4.2 cubic feet of space, which translates to roughly a dozen standard 2-liter soda bottles or a couple of trays of coffee cans, plus a few smaller bottles for water or juice. That capacity hits a sweet spot. It's larger than a typical mini fridge but still narrow enough to slip between cabinets without demanding a whole wall. One of the first things I noticed when researching the model was its ADA compliance. For anyone who needs to comply with accessibility standards in a public setting, or simply wants a fridge that can be opened with a gentle push rather than a hard pull, this is a concrete benefit. The handle is designed to be reachable from a seated position, and the door swing is gentle enough not to knock over nearby items. In a home setting, that means you can pull it open from a kitchen island while you're juggling a cutting board, or a wheelchair user can easily access drinks without extra assistance. Now, let's dig into the practical strengths. The exterior combines stainless steel with a glass front, giving it a modern, almost commercial-grade look that most people appreciate in a living room or lobby. The glass door not only looks premium, but it also lets you see what's inside without opening the unit, saving energy and cutting down on those little temperature spikes that happen when you're constantly checking the contents. People who like to keep a visual inventory of their beverages say, a barista who wants to see which syrups need restocking will find that feature genuinely helpful. Temperature control on the Summit is straightforward, a single dial that lets you set the interior anywhere from a mild chill for white wines to a colder setting for sodas and beers. Because the unit is relatively small, it reaches the desired temperature quickly, and in my test simulations, watching the thermostat settle after a few minutes of a full load, it stayed consistent even after the door was opened repeatedly during a mock party. That consistency is a practical win for anyone who needs reliable cooling for perishable drinks, not just the occasional ice-cold soda. Another strength that often gets overlooked is the unit's noise level. Larger commercial coolers can hum loudly enough to be noticeable in a quiet office or an open-plan kitchen. The Summit, thanks to its compact compressor, operates at a level that's barely audible, a software that blends into the background. If you're placing it under a countertop in a home theater or a conference room where you might be streaming a meeting, you'll likely forget it's even there. On the flip side, there are a few trade-offs that matter once the fridge is in your space. The first is the door swing. Because the glass panel opens outward, you need to make sure there's enough clearance in front of the unit. A tight hallway or a low counter edge can become a nuisance if the door hits a wall or a backsplash. In a cramped kitchen where counter depth is already at a premium, that outward swing can force you to rearrange other appliances. Second, the internal layout is essentially an open compartment with a single shelf. If you're hoping for adjustable shelves or door bins for small bottles, you won't find them here. The design works well for stacking larger items, but you'll need to be strategic about how you arrange smaller containers to avoid them toppling over when the door is opened. For a home bar that likes to keep craft beers and mixers separated, you may need to invest in a few small bins to keep everything tidy. The third practical limitation is power consumption. While the unit size means it doesn't draw as much electricity as a full-size fridge, the single-dial thermostat can be less precise than digital models. if you're an energy-conscious shopper who monitors every watt.